Daniel Sports Central, be giving you guys our 2024 season predictions for the Virginia Tech Hokies, a team that went 7-6 in the 2023 season. This is one of my favorite dark horses of the 2024 season. You consider the experience that this team is going to have, the players this team is returning off of what was a 2023 season that started terribly but ended pretty well. I mean, this is a very interesting team. Looking forward to 2024, and we'll be talking about what you can expect out of the Hokies here today. The players this team is losing and returning, and predict their schedule top to bottom in this video. So with that, let's get started with a quick recap of 2023. Once again, the record being 7-6. Things were not looking good in September for this team. They did have a week 1 win over Old Dominion, but then lost to Purdue, Rutgers, and Marshall in back-to-back weeks. So, I mean, this team did have 2 Big Ten teams on their non-con. I mean, Purdue was not very good last season. Rutgers was halfway decent, but still, they 1-3 starters, a pretty tough look. But this was one of those teams that really, I would say, improved a lot over the course of the season. They beat Pitt by 17. They did lose to Florida State kind of terribly there. But then after that, this team won 4 of their last 6. If you include the bowl game, it's 5 of their last 7. I mean, they had some pretty dominant wins as well. They took care of Wake Forest, no problem. Same with Syracuse. Beat Boston College 48-22. Beat Virginia 55-17, and then took care of Tulane 41-20 in the Military Bowl. So, I mean, the Louisville loss was kind of an ugly one. The NC State loss was pretty close. But overall, this was definitely a team that improved quite a bit, I would say, over 2023. And when you consider the experience of this team, Kyron Drones coming back, this receiving core, this offense is returning almost everybody. Looking forward to 2024, and the defense is going to have a lot of good experience as well. This is one of those teams that really, I don't really hear a lot of noise about them, but this honestly could be a true contender in the ACC. Looking forward to this upcoming season, as long as Kyron Drones stays healthy and this offense stays healthy. I mean, there's a lot of potential on this team. Looking forward to 2024. You take a look at the schedule. Got Vanderbilt on the road for week 1. So an SEC matchup on the road, but Vanderbilt's really no big deal, honestly. Then you got Marshall at home, Old Dominion on the road, Rutgers at home, which Rutgers this upcoming season, I will say, usually they're one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. I could see them being a dark horse in the Big Ten this season, maybe a 7 or 8 win team. So that's a game worth keeping an eye on. Then Miami on the road to finish out September. October, you got Stanford, Boston College, Georgia Tech. And then in November, you got Syracuse, Clemson, Duke, and Virginia. Looking at the first month or so, I do see this being a team that starts 4-0, honestly. I mean, Vanderbilt, a very beatable team there. Marshall, Old Dominion. And I think these 3 games are very much winnable games for this team. I think it's honestly just about winning the games that you should, and Virginia Tech should win each of these first 3 games. I mean, last season, September was kind of tough. If they're going to have a good season, I mean, it's going to be pretty important to have a strong start, which I think this team ends up doing. Rutgers at home. This is, once again, a pretty interesting matchup. Rutgers is going to have some good experience as well. They're honestly in a similar position. If you consider Rutgers in the Big Ten and Virginia Tech in the ACC, these 2 teams are definitely, I would say, 2 strong dark horse teams in their respective conferences. And the winner of that matchup could be on their way to a really strong season. And, I mean, even if Rutgers does lose, I could still see them being pretty good. But Virginia Tech, I do have winning that matchup. Having that in a home environment, I think, is kind of what gives the Hokies the edge there. So a 4-0 start. Then you go to Miami. This is where I do think you take a loss. I mean, Cam Ward and Miami, they're going to be a tough team this upcoming season. There's like 3 teams that I would say are true ACC contenders. Miami, you could say Clemson. Florida State's probably up there as well. Virginia Tech is kind of in that, is very much up there. And, I mean, they are fringe top 3. They could definitely be in the ACC championship this season. I really wouldn't be surprised. You look at Stanford, Boston College. I would say both easy wins here. Stanford on the road going to the West Coast is going to be interesting for an ACC matchup, but I do think you beat them. They're a pretty beatable team. Georgia Tech, I will say they're kind of, I mean, they're not going to be as good as Virginia Tech this season. I could see Georgia Tech, though, being kind of a dangerous team for some opponents. I think Virginia Tech, that's not a game you want to sleep on. I think Georgia Tech, I think you beat them, but that's one of those games that honestly it could sneak up on the Hokies and Georgia Tech steals a win. But I do have you 7-1 going into November, a pretty strong record. Syracuse on the road, kind of a close game, but I do think you find a way to beat them. Clemson at home, I do have you dropping this one, although I will say I think you either lose to Clemson or Georgia Tech. You're not going to lose both games, but one of those games is going to be a loss. So if you lose to Georgia Tech, I wouldn't be surprised if you come around a couple of weeks later and beat Clemson, which could be considered a pretty good upset. But even then, I mean, a 2-loss Virginia Tech team on November 9th could potentially be ranked. So maybe it wouldn't be a big upset. But, I mean, I do have you dropping that Clemson game. Duke on the road, Virginia, both very beatable teams. I've got a 10-win season coming up for Virginia Tech here, which some might think sounds kind of crazy. But honestly, in the ACC, which is really a wide-open conference, I mean, Florida State's going to be tough. Miami's going to be tough. I would say Clemson should be pretty good as well. Put Virginia Tech in that conversation as well. I think this is a team that has a pretty favorable schedule. I mean, 2 of your first 3 games on the road could be dangerous potentially. Maybe you lose a game that you shouldn't there. I mean, but I just don't expect that happening. This is going to be a team with some strong experience. Kyron Drones coming back. He's a true dual-threat quarterback. He rushed for over 800 yards last season. I mean, he deserves more attention. He's a pretty strong player. If he can improve his passing a bit, I mean, he really didn't even turn over the ball that much last season. So I think there's a lot of potential. I'd say that's a good word for this team. This is a team with high potential. They've got a strong backfield. The receiving core is going to have some pretty strong depth as well. So I'm pretty optimistic for this Virginia Tech team. I think they could make a run for the playoff, honestly. But obviously, it's going to come down to the Miami game, the Clemson game, and not taking a loss in between that you shouldn't. And so I do think you lose to Miami and Clemson, so a 10-win season. But that puts this team in the conversation, or at least in the running, to be in the ACC championship once we get to December. But I would say for the range, the ceiling's 11 wins. I think this team at least takes 1 loss somewhere. But I've got 7-5 for the floor. Last season, this team got up to 7 wins. They won their bowl game. They were a much improved team. They've got strong momentum going into 2024. So I honestly think 7-5 is the floor. I would say 9 to 10 wins is very much reasonable for this team. But once again, it's just about can this team win the games that matters? And obviously, there's a lot of dark horse games on here as well. Rutgers, Georgia Tech, definitely games not to sleep on. But with that, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Virginia Tech. Once again, one of those dark horse teams that I'm very interested in looking forward to in 2024. But with that, appreciate you guys watching as always. My name's Evan. This is All Sports Central. Stay tuned for more. We'll catch you on the next one.